Laura had always been a careful planner. Her days were a mix of household chores, errands, and small routines she followed almost mechanically. But this Thursday morning began differently. The familiar dripping sound from the kitchen sink broke the rhythm of her morning. Water pooled slowly in the sink, and she realized the leak had worsened overnight. It wasn't urgent, but she knew ignoring it would only make it worse. Her mind immediately went to Michael, her husband, who had always been the one to fix such things. But he was busy at work. And Laura didn't want to bother him over something small. She remembered Michael had mentioned his friend Ethan, someone he trusted to handle small repairs around the house. Ethan was a cheerful man, known for his easygoing attitude and helpful nature. Laura hesitated for a moment, thinking about the visit. It would be just a quick repair, and she could manage the kitchen until then. She called Ethan, and he agreed to come by later that morning. She felt a mix of anticipation and curiosity. After all, Ethan had always been friendly with Michael, and she had only met him a few times at gatherings. By mid-morning, a knock on the door interrupted Laura's thoughts. She wiped her hands on her apron and opened it. Ethan stood there, smiling, holding a toolbox. He was taller than she remembered, with a confident, relaxed posture, and his smile seemed warmer in person. "Morning, Laura. Heard there's a little leak that needs fixing," he said cheerfully. She invited him in, gesturing toward the kitchen. As they walked together, Laura's mind raced. She reminded herself that this was just a repair. Yet seeing Ethan alone in her home created a strange tension she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't inappropriate, not in the slightest. But there was something in the way he carried himself, and the gentle attention he gave to details, that made her feel unusually aware of his presence. Ethan set his toolbox on the counter and immediately started examining the sink. "Looks like a minor leak. Nothing serious," he said, crouching slightly to inspect the pipes. Laura stayed nearby, pretending to tidy the kitchen, but really watching him work. She couldn't help noticing the precision of his movements, the focused expression on his face. Something about the way he concentrated made her appreciate his skill. And for a brief moment, she felt admiration mixing with a strange flutter in her chest. They began talking casually. Ethan asked about her day, about Michael, and about life in the neighborhood. Laura responded naturally, feeling comfortable and at ease in his company. Their conversation flowed smoothly, moving from small talk about the weather to humorous stories about Michael's college days. She laughed more freely than she had in weeks, and Ethan's laughter was equally contagious. The air between them, while completely innocent, began to feel charged with an emotional energy neither had expected. At one point, Ethan paused, looking thoughtful. "You know, Laura, you manage this household really well. I can see why Michael trusts you so much," he said with genuine admiration. Laura felt her cheeks warm slightly. She appreciated the compliment, but quickly reminded herself to stay grounded. He was Michael's friend, and she had to maintain boundaries. Yet the acknowledgement stirred something inside her, a mixture of pride, gratitude, and an unexpected sense of connection. The leak, though minor, took longer than expected to fix. Ethan worked methodically, tightening screws, adjusting pipes, and explaining each step as he went along. Laura found herself fascinated by his skill and by the calm confidence he exuded. She tried to focus on other chores, but kept glancing at him, noting small details, the way he tilted his head when thinking, the gentle humor in his eyes, the ease with which he interacted with her dot. There was a moment when Ethan accidentally dropped a small wrench. Laura instinctively bent to pick it up, and their hands brushed. It was a fleeting touch, but it sent an unexpected jolt through her. She quickly handed it to him, smiling awkwardly, and he returned the gesture with a slight nod, his eyes meeting hers for a brief, charged moment. It wasn't physical attraction in a direct sense, but it was something new and confusing for her on emotional intensity she hadn't felt in a long time. Their conversation shifted naturally as the repair continued. Ethan asked about her hobbies, her work, and her personal interests beyond the household. Laura felt an unusual openness, sharing thoughts and feelings she rarely expressed. It was the kind of emotional connection that felt intimate without crossing any lines. Ethan listened attentively, making her feel seen in a way that was both comforting and slightly exhilarating. Time passed quickly, and Laura realized the leak was finally fixed. Ethan wiped his hands and stood, stretching slightly. He glanced around the kitchen, seemingly reluctant to leave. Laura noticed a small pang of disappointment herself. There was a strange sense of emptiness creeping in now that he was preparing to go. She shook it off, reminding herself that he was a guest, a friend helping with a simple task. Yet the emotional resonance lingered. "I really appreciate you letting me help out," Ethan said softly, his voice carrying a hint of sincerity that made Laura's heart flutter. "It's rare to spend time like this, talking, connecting, without distractions." Laura nodded, feeling warmth rise in her chest. "It's been nice," she replied, choosing her words carefully. There was a subtle vulnerability in her tone, a quiet acknowledgement of the unexpected depth of their interaction. Ethan's smile broadened, and for a moment, the world outside the kitchen seemed to fade. She reflected on the unusual morning. The presence of another adult, someone attentive and kind, had opened a space for emotions she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't inappropriate or wrong, but it was an eye-opening experience, showing her a side of herself that longed for recognition and meaningful connection. As Ethan reached for his coat, a sudden sound startled them, both the car pulling into the driveway. Laura's heart skipped a beat. Michael was home earlier than expected. The tension in the air shifted instantly from emotional curiosity to sudden awareness of boundaries. She felt a mixture of relief and mild panic. Ethan, ever polite, smiled and said, "Looks like I should get going." Michael's home. He picked up his toolbox and Laura walked with him to the door. The moment felt charged, yet perfectly safe. A lingering sense of unspoken understanding hanging between them. Once Ethan left, Laura closed the door and leaned against it for a moment, taking a deep breath. The house felt quieter, almost too quiet, and she realized the morning had been far more than a simple repair. She had experienced a range of emotions, admiration, connection, subtle longing, and she understood that these feelings, while intense, didn't have to lead to anything improper. They were a reflection of human complexity, the emotional nuances that could arise in everyday life. Laura moved back to the kitchen, noting how normal everything seemed now. The leak was fixed, the house was quiet, and yet she carried the memory of Ethan's visit like a small, vivid spark. It was a reminder that life was unpredictable, that emotions could surface unexpectedly, and that she was capable of feeling deeply even in ordinary moments. She reminded herself that nothing had crossed a line. There had been no inappropriate behavior, no intentions to betray trust. What remained was the emotional connection, subtle and fleeting, that had illuminated her morning. It was a story she would carry privately, a lesson in understanding her own heart, and a testament to the way simple encounters could leave lasting impressions. By late morning, Laura had returned to her chores, the house returning to its familiar rhythm. She found herself smiling occasionally, thinking about Ethan's easy humor, his attentive nature, and the strange, fleeting closeness they had shared. It was a day that started with a dripping sink and ended with a profound sense of awareness about her own emotions, though nothing physical had happened. Laura felt alive in a way she hadn't anticipated. The emotional tension, the quiet admiration, the shared laughter, all of it had created a memory that would linger, quietly shaping her perspective on connection, attention, and human warmth. She understood that some moments didn't need dramatic endings or consequences. They existed simply to remind her that life, even in the mundane, could stir unexpected emotions. And as she prepared lunch, glancing occasionally at the door where Ethan had left, Laura felt a soft smile form on her lips. She didn't know when he would return or if he would, but she did know that this morning had reminded her of the complexity of human connection, the power of kindness, and the subtle intensity that could exist in simple, everyday encounters. Cliffhanger? Laura paused mid-step, realizing that while nothing had crossed a line, the spark of connection had left a mark. She wondered, would the next time Ethan visited feel just as ordinary, or would it shift into something far more meaningful? The following days after Ethan's visit lingered in Laura's mind more than she expected. She found herself thinking about his smile, his quiet attentiveness, and the ease with which he had moved through her home. Life had returned to its usual rhythm. Michael went to work. Errands needed running, and the house chores demanded her attention, but beneath the surface, a quiet restlessness stirred in her. She kept glancing at the toolbox in the garage, almost half expecting it to move on its own, or for Ethan to reappear. Michael's presence was constant, but even his company couldn't erase the vivid impression of Ethan's visit. Laura realized how unusual it was to feel such a subtle connection with someone entirely unrelated to her daily life. She wondered if Michael noticed anything in her demeanor, the quiet glances or the slight hesitation in her steps. She reminded herself firmly that Ethan was Michael's friend, that their interaction had been entirely innocent, and yet the intensity of her feelings was undeniable. By midweek, the leak in the kitchen had been fixed and the house seemed quieter than usual. Laura had grown comfortable with the stillness, but her mind kept returning to the idea of someone else being there, someone capable of noticing small details, of bringing warmth and humor in the middle of mundane tasks. She tried to distract herself with cleaning, organizing, and even tackling some paperwork she had been postponing. Yet, each time she opened a drawer or rearranged a shelf, she felt an unexpected longing for Ethan's presence. Then the phone rang one afternoon. Laura's heart jumped when she saw it was Ethan calling. She took a deep breath and answered, trying to sound casual. "Hello, Ethan," she said. "Hi, Laura. I hope I'm not disturbing you," Ethan replied, his voice calm and friendly. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. Mind if I come over for a bit?" Laura hesitated for just a moment, weighing her feelings. She knew this was entirely harmless. He was a friend. Michael had no objections, and it was simply another visit. Yet her mind raced. Something about this unexpected call felt charged, almost electric. "Sure," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "Come on over." Within half an hour, Ethan arrived. The moment he stepped through the door, Laura felt that same quiet thrill she had experienced the first time. His presence filled the room in a way that was both comforting and intense. They greeted each other warmly, and Laura led him to the living room, insisting he sit down while she prepared some tea. As they settled, conversation flowed effortlessly. They laughed about minor incidents at Michael's office, shared anecdotes about neighbors, and discussed local events. Laura noticed how easy it was to talk to him, how his attention never wavered, and how he seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts. There was a subtle intimacy in the exchange, a feeling of being understood that Laura hadn't realized she missed so much. Hours seemed to slip by unnoticed. At one point, Laura found herself revealing stories from her childhood, memories she had never shared with Michael or anyone else. Ethan listened attentively, asking questions with gentle curiosity. She felt her heart open in a way she hadn't anticipated. There was no impropriety, no crossing of boundaries, just a deep emotional connection that made her feel alive and seen. During a pause in conversation, Ethan complimented her thoughtfulness and her ability to maintain balance in her life. "It's rare to meet someone so grounded yet so open to sharing their inner world," he said softly. Laura felt warmth flood her chest. She appreciated the words, recognizing that he saw her in ways she had almost forgotten existed. The conversation eventually shifted to lighter topics: movies, music, and books, but the energy between them remained unusually vivid. Laura realized that she had been craving not physical attention, but recognition, understanding, and emotional engagement. Ethan provided that effortlessly, and she found herself enjoying the moment more than she expected. Then, a small incident brought a wave of awareness crashing back. A mug slipped from the counter as Laura moved to refill it, and Ethan instinctively caught it. Their hands brushed slightly, and for a fleeting second, both paused, recognizing the intensity of the contact. It was completely innocent, but it made Laura acutely aware of her feelings. She quickly pulled back, forcing a laugh, while Ethan smiled reassuringly, returning to his seat without a word. The moment passed, leaving only a subtle tension. an acknowledgement of an emotional undercurrent they were both feeling but not acting on. As the afternoon continued, Ethan's watch caught his attention. "I should probably head out soon," he said. Laura nodded, feeling a flicker of disappointment. She had grown accustomed to the emotional warmth his presence brought, and the thought of returning to the quiet of her house alone felt heavier than it should. Before leaving, Ethan paused at the door. "Laura, I just wanted to say, it's rare to meet someone like you. I hope we can do this again sometime," he said sincerely. Laura smiled, feeling a mixture of gratitude and excitement. "I'd like that," she replied softly. Once he left, Laura stood at the door for a moment, absorbing the experience. She reflected on the unusual intimacy of the visit, recognizing that it was entirely safe, entirely innocent, yet profoundly meaningful. Her heart had been stirred, and her mind was alive with thoughts she hadn't anticipated. She realized that emotional connections could be as thrilling as any other experience in life, and sometimes even more powerful. Over the next few days, Laura found herself anticipating small interactions. She thought about what to ask Ethan next, what stories to share, and how to maintain the same natural, heartfelt conversation they had enjoyed. It wasn't about crossing lines. It was about connection, about feeling understood, about the subtle thrill of being seen. One evening, as she prepared dinner, Michael mentioned a small plumbing issue in the guest bathroom. Laura smiled inwardly, thinking of Ethan, and casually suggested maybe Ethan could help again. Michael agreed, not thinking much of it. To Laura, it felt like an opportunity to experience another afternoon of connection, another chance to explore feelings that were entirely innocent yet undeniably powerful. When Ethan arrived the next day, the mood was different, more relaxed, more comfortable. They joked about minor mishaps in the kitchen, exchanged thoughts on home improvements, and shared laughter in ways that made the house feel alive. Laura noticed that she could be herself around him without pretense or guardedness. His presence was calming yet invigorating, a paradox she found both exciting and reassuring as they moved through the house together. Ethan's attentiveness remained unchanged. He noticed small details: how Laura arranged items on the counter, how she preferred certain utensils, how she kept the kitchen tidy. Each observation was casual, yet it created a sense of appreciation that Laura hadn't realized she craved. She felt seen, acknowledged, and respected in ways that went far beyond the surface. By late afternoon, the repair was finished. Laura found herself lingering near him, reluctant to return fully to the quiet solitude of the house. Ethan noticed the hesitation and smiled knowingly. "You know, Laura, these visits are enjoyable, not because of anything unusual, but because they're real. Conversations, laughter, and genuine connection are rare." Laura nodded, feeling a rush of warmth. She understood completely. This wasn't about temptation or attraction in the conventional sense. It was about human connection, about shared moments that were meaningful and comforting. Ethan's visit had become a small but significant part of her life, and she found herself looking forward to each encounter with a mixture of anticipation and quiet joy. The day ended, and Ethan left once again, toolbox in hand, with a wave and a smile. Laura closed the door and leaned against it, reflecting on the experiences of the past week. Her emotions were complex: appreciation, excitement, curiosity, and a subtle longing. Yet she knew she was acting responsibly, maintaining boundaries and appreciating the richness of human interaction in a safe, respectful way. That night, as Laura prepared for bed, she thought about Ethan's visits and the unexpected warmth they'd brought to her life. She realized that connections could take many forms, that emotional intimacy could exist independently of physical interaction, and that the simplest moments could leave the deepest impressions. It was a lesson in mindfulness, appreciation, understanding the nuances of human emotion. Cliffhanger. As Laura drifted off to sleep, her phone buzzed unexpectedly. A message from Ethan appeared. "Hey Laura, I hope it's not too late, but I had an idea for tomorrow. Would you like to hear it?" Laura's heart raced, realizing that their connection might deepen even further, and that tomorrow could bring another unexpected turn in this quiet, emotionally charged story.